Hello and welcome to Book 3, Unit 11 of the Interchange series. Today we're going to be talking about time clauses and also time phrases to indicate the sequence of events. So let's get started. Well, first we need to talk about clauses. What are clauses? Now, a clause is basically a sentence. A clauses always have a subject and a verb. For something to be a clause, it always has to have a subject and a verb. Now we have different types of clauses. We have time clauses and main clauses that we are going to look at. So let's first look at the time clause, okay? Now our time clause usually indicates something about time. So here we have the word before. So that's our time clause. For example, before I studied at Untitled, I didn't like English. Okay, so we have our time clause and our main clause. Now, why do we call it a main clause? Well, the reason is, if I cover this up like this, and I just read this sentence, I didn't like English. I have a subject and I have a verb, and I don't need any more information for this sentence to make sense. So, for this reason, my main clause is very independent. It does not need any more information. It's very independent. Okay? Now, if I cover my main clause up and I just read my time clause, now it says, before I studied at Untitled, and I need more information. I'm asking myself, well, what? What happened before you studied at Untitled? So in this case, my time clause is very dependent. It's very dependent on my main clause to make sense. So, before I studied at Untitled, I didn't like English. Now that's a complete thought. Now, something to look at is we can change the order of our main clause and our time clause. Right. So if I just do something like this, okay, now I don't need the comma anymore. And now it reads like this. I didn't like English before I studied at Untitled. So I can use my main clause first and then my time clause, and that's okay. So this is what we're looking at today, is our clauses. So let's look at this situation, okay? It says here, I was looking for work. So you're looking in the newspaper, you're looking online, asking friends, looking for work, right? And eventually, I got a job, right? So that's big news, I got a job. Now we're going to use our time phrases to think about things like, well, what happened before you got a job? What are the things that happened before you got a job? Or, for example, what are the things that happened after you got a job? So what are the things before and what are the things after you got a job? Or maybe the moment you got the job, what happened? So what happened the moment that you got the job? So we're going to be using these different ideas to talk about different time phrases and different time clauses to make more complex sentences. So let's look at some possibilities for what happened when you got the job. For example, we can use time phrases for sequences, like this. We can use time phrases for things that happen at the same time or almost at the same time. And we have some other time sequences that we use for the past perfect specifically. Okay? So let's look at these. Let's start with our sequence time phrases. For example, we already looked at before and after. So this one says, before I got a job, I was completely broke. Or after I got a job, I wasn't poor anymore. Right? So before indicates something that happened previously to this action, and after refers to something that happened at a later time from this action, right? So, those are before and after, using our commas, remember? Now let's look at the same time. If two things happen at the same time, okay, we can use things like once, we have the moment, and we have as soon as, right? Now these all indicate that the action happened And then immediately after that, or at the same time, the second action happened. So it reads like this. Once I got a job, and we use the comma. Once I got a job, I started making money. Right? Or let's look at another example. The moment. The moment I got a job, I celebrated at Bar Mulo's. Again, these two actions happen almost together or at the same time. Let's look at the third one. As soon as I got a job, I became more responsible. Again, these two actions happen at almost the same time, or one after the other. Okay? So all of these examples, for once, the moment, and as soon as, they all refer to things that happen almost at the same time or very close together. Now, last, we're going to look at the sequence with the past perfect. So using things like until and by the time, we often use with the past perfect, right? So let's read this sentence. Until I got a job, I had never used a suit. Okay? So remember, the past perfect is always our past perfect had for the auxiliary and our past participle used, right? So had never used, that's the past perfect. We always use that with until. Or let's look at by the time. For example, by the time I got a job, I had applied many places. So again, we're using our auxiliary verb had and our past participle applied, and that's the past perfect. Okay? So let's look at these in a different way. Maybe they can help us look at a different way. Now remember, I can use my time clause second, and I can use my main clause first. So I'm going to move this over here. Okay? And when I do that, remember, I don't need the comma anymore, so I'm going to get rid of that. Now, my time clause is second, and I read it like this. I had never used a suit until I got a job, right? So it's like I had never used a suit, I'm not using a suit, until, boom, I got a job. And now I use a suit. Okay, so we use until often to show a change. And we do that a lot using a negative. Notice that's a negative. So it's I had never used a suit. I'm not using a suit. Boom, until I got a job. And now I do. Now I do use a suit. Okay? Let's look at the second one. For example, I had applied many places by the time I got a job. So this is like, this action happened and it's done, right? And then later on, okay, I get a job. So this is like I had applied many places, right? And it's done. Boom, finished. And then I got a job. By the time is often kind of like saying before. It's almost the same thing as before, but we use it a lot with the past perfect, had applied. Okay? Now, remember, for all of these, I can still use a different order. For example, I can put these over here, right? And I can put these over here, right? And remember, I don't need the commas anymore, so I'll get rid of those. And they all read this like the same. I was completely broke, starting at the top, right? I was completely broke before I got a job. Or I wasn't poor anymore after I got a job. Or I started making money once I got a job. Or I celebrated at Bar Mulo's the moment I got a job. Or I became more responsible as soon as I got a job, right? So remember, your time phrases are usually for sequence. They're indicating things at the same time or that happen immediately after each other. Or we use them with sequences, usually with the past perfect. For example, with until and by the time. Okay, so please go ahead and pause the video for the pause and practice. So pause the video and do the following exercise. This exercise is in your book. It's on page 73 of book 3. It's part A, okay? What you're going to do is you're going to match the clauses in the column A here with the appropriate answer in column B. So you're going to look for what information in this clause goes with the information in these clauses. And you're going to make those matches. So go ahead and pause the video. When you're finished and you think you have your answers, you can press play and you can check your answers. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video. Okay, so you should have finished doing the practice in the book. If you didn't have the book, you could do it on the web page that we provided. Now here are the answers, so go ahead and check your answers. And you can pause the video again if you need to. Okay, and to finish, please do the homework for this grammar topic. To do this, you need to click on the think word that's in the browser on the right-hand side of the web page. And remember to save your answers for each question so that we can make sure you're doing the homework correctly. So go ahead and do those. Thank you for listening and good luck.